A couple of days ago, on the 3rd of June 2024 to be precise, and honestly without too much fanfare, Melbourne introduced the newest addition to its urban passenger railway network, the very creatively named East Pakenham Station, which, as you might have guessed, is located just to the east of the existing Pakenham Station in, well, the suburb of Pakenham East. Pakenham sits at the southeast of Melbourne's suburban fringe, just under 60 kilometers away from the Melbourne Central Business District, and is one of the fastest growing areas in the country. The new station sits just 2 kilometers further east than the existing Pakenham station, and has become the new terminus of the Pakenham line, which is keeping the name Pakenham Line despite Melbourne's usual convention of naming their train lines after the station at the end of each line, but I'm starting to get a bit off track. East Pakenham Station was built as part of Melbourne's level crossing removal project, which has seen the removal of 3 level crossings in the area. At McGregor Road, Main Street, which was right next to the existing Pakenham Station, and Racecourse Road. These removals saw the railway track in the area replaced with elevated skyrail, and saw the existing ground level Pakenham Station replaced by a new, and much nicer looking in my opinion, elevated station in roughly the same spot. That said, the old ground level station did have various tracks available for stabling trains, and these would have been pretty hard to replicate with the new elevated station. So these have been moved out to the new East Pakenham station, which has been built at ground level. But apart from finding a new home for these stabling facilities, which don't necessarily require the building of a whole new station, why has this new station, that again is just 2 kilometers away from the existing station, been built anyway? Well, before we get to that, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have subscribed to the channel. We've recently just passed the 10,000 subscriber mark, which is honestly pretty cool. To celebrate, I'm thinking of doing a special video, and as part of that video, I'm thinking of doing a Q&A. So if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, drop them in the comments below. But now, back to why build East Pakenham. For starters, building it wasn't actually terribly difficult. The station was just added onto the existing track belonging to the Gippsland railway line, which is currently used by regional V-Line trains travelling out to Traralgon and Bairnsdale. This section of rail was already double-tracked, and because of a depot used to store some of Melbourne's electric suburban train fleet that's a little further down the line, it was also electrified. So there was very little work needed in terms of building new track. And most of what actually needed to be built was just the station structure and those stabling and turnback facilities I mentioned before. That said, the Victorian government did give 2 primary reasons for why the station got built. The first reason was to improve the reliability of the line, especially for those regional V-Line trains that use it. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how the new station will achieve this. But for those of you who are interested, the channel Tateset did a recent video on the topic where he explained it far better than I could. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to check that out. But in summary, new express tracks as well as new stabling and turnback facilities mean that V-Line trains will now be able to skip past the station without having to stop and wait for metro trains sitting at the platform. Meaning they will be less likely to be delayed than they are currently, where at the existing Pakenham station it's not uncommon for a V-Line train to have to stop and wait for a metro train that's turning around and blocking the track through the station. Now, the second reason given by the Victorian government for the station's construction is that, while currently the land surrounding the station is fairly sparsely populated, over the next decade 7,000 new homes are expected to be built in the area, as part of the government's plan to tackle the state's severe housing shortage. So this will help us avoid the usual story of new Australian suburban developments, where new suburbs are built on the outskirts of Australian cities that are miles away from any facilities and have no real public transport options. There have been plenty of horror stories where the residents of these suburbs then end up having to wait years, if not decades, for these amenities to be added, often at a far higher cost than if they had been built before the area had been developed. By building the new station before the housing developments get too far underway, the new residents of these suburbs should have access to at least some of these amenities the day they move in. Now, this all sounds like a good thing, and it is nice to see the Victorian government taking a more proactive approach to providing transport infrastructure for new housing developments. But the title of this video suggests that not everybody is seeing this new station as such a positive development. So why is that? Well, as a supporter of mass transit, I'm always happy to see new additions to a city's public transport network. But this new station is really far out of Melbourne. In fact, a trip from East Pakenham to Flinders Street Station in the heart of Melbourne will take an hour and 15 minutes. And that's not including any time waiting at the station, connecting buses, or the time spent walking you might need to realistically include to actually make the trip door to door. So in reality, you'd be looking at trip times from a home in East Pakenham to the city of closer to an hour and a half to 2 hours. While urbanists often complain about roads and highways encouraging more and more suburban sprawl, the same can be true for railways as well. And East Pakenham Station will definitely be causing more urban sprawl. Those journey times to the city are just unsustainably long. And while in fairness the city might not be every commuter's final destination, it will surely be for a lot of them. As a side note, I'm a little surprised the opportunity wasn't taken to add express tracks to the Pakenham and Cranbourne lines as part of the level crossing removal project, which did see large portions of those lines get rebuilt, as this could have helped make journey times a little more reasonable. But that's something for me to get into when I eventually do a proper video on that particular project. But given how long trips to the city will take, people living in the new developments will basically be receiving none of the benefits of living in a major cosmopolitan city like Melbourne, like its good amenities, vibrant streets, and having plenty of things to do, while getting all the cons of suburban living. These newly planned developments around the station also sound like they will still be relatively low density, meaning they will have a hard time sustaining their own amenities, at least within a walkable distance. I mentioned before that the plan is to build around 7,000 new homes in the area over the coming decade. In comparison, around Green Square Station in Sydney, 33,000 new homes are expected to be built. Now to be fair, Green Square is a lot closer to the city and is one of the densest areas in the country, but it does show that East Pakenham could aim a little higher. The lower density and distance from the city will make providing public amenities like utilities, schools, and good bus services, something Melbourne already struggles with, quite expensive, while private amenities like cafes or shops would be too unprofitable to do in a walkable manner. On top of that, there's also the issue of this new suburban sprawl eating away at the land that could be used for farming or nature preserves at the edges of our cities. But ultimately, as a proponent of public transport infrastructure, it's hard for me to be too critical about a new train station being built. If housing is going to be built in East Pakenham, I would far rather they get rail access than not. And I am especially happy to see the Victorian government take a more proactive approach to providing rail infrastructure to new suburbs. However, I think this effort would be better focused on improving the housing density and public transport access in established areas, to encourage better urban environments and less endless suburban sprawl. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider liking it and subscribing if you haven't already. I want to give a shout out to the channel Stray Air Trains, who helpfully let me use some of their footage of East Pakenham Station in the background of this video. I'll put a link to their channel in the description if you want to check them out. And as a reminder, I am planning that 10,000 subs Q&A video, so drop any questions you might have in the comments below. I'm City Moose, and as usual, thanks for watching.